Welcome. Could you please tell me who you are and why you're here?
Hello, my name's Mark Mulligan. I'm a music industry analyst and co-founder of Midia Consulting. I'm here because I've done a keynote today and moderated 2 panels yesterday.
And what was the keynote about? What was the point you wanted to make?
So my keynote was, I suppose you could say, it was a bit of a slap round the face. It was many people believe that we're turning the corner now, that finally we're beginning to see some digital recovery. I do not believe that's the case. I think that there are some great innovations around the edges. So, companies like Songkick and lots of discovery services, all of that stuff's fantastic. But the actual core of the music industry, getting people to spend money on music, that bit just is not moving anywhere near quickly enough. And the one bit of success people point to, Spotify and Deezer in 2012, we're talking tiny numbers. 1 or 2 million, 3 million, 4 million here, when iTunes has 400 million credit card linked accounts. So not enough is happening. And unless something changes soon, we're going to have a couple of bad years ahead of us.
So where does the optimism come from? Because I've heard a lot of optimism here the last 2 days.
So I think the optimism is great. It's around the stuff around the edges. We're seeing it's what has happened over the last few years. It's become increasingly difficult for small startup companies to be able to launch music services because they haven't been able to afford to pay the advances for licenses. And so what you've seen is lots of the startups are focusing on things around the edges of music.
They leave the licensing for what it is and think we don't go there because
but it's just too much
difficult.
effort, and we can't convince an investor to pay us 2 or 3 million pounds, dollars, euros that just disappears straight into an advance for a bunch of record labels. And so you're seeing the people left who are trying to solve the core problem is just a few really big companies, Apple, Amazon, and Google, of course, and then just really big back companies like Spotify and Deezer. But then you don't have the sort of, a big amount of, of real sort of meaty services trying to solve the problem. And I also believe that there isn't enough happening in terms of the experience of a music service. Too many of the music services look too similar. It's a download, it's a stream, but what about the experience around it? Everybody's digital experiences have transformed in the last few years. We're used to having Facebook timelines pump information at us. We're used to having apps that are interactive, that move when we move them, and that we can look at, we can dive into. Meanwhile, music services, they've stayed pretty static in that time. So it's time for digital music services to catch up.
When we start with the first point, it's just a few very large companies who are active. Is that a problem? Why is it a problem?
Because it means that we have a concentration. Now, a concentration can slow down innovation. Innovation often happens when you're responding to competitive threat. You innovate because you want to stay ahead. Exactly. And if it's just a few companies, then everybody works out how to coexist, and the market moves more slowly. So you look at any market, not just technology markets, they move more quickly and deliver better products when there are more competitors in the marketplace. So I think that's one key reason. The other is it actually weakens the power of the record labels. And when I say power, I don't mean in some sort of controlling manner. I mean their ability to ensure that the market is evolving in the right way. Because when you've got one company like Apple controlling so much of the download market, and a couple of companies controlling so much of the streaming market, and YouTube controlling so much of the video market, they call the shots. And it becomes increasingly difficult for the music industry to retain proper control over the direction of where the market's going. So, I think, so what you'll see me saying is that it's both a problem for innovators, because it's difficult for them, the barriers are so high for them to get into the market, but it's also difficult for the rights holders because you've got a few huge companies dictating.
They have to deal with, So how can this change? Because licensing has been a problem for decades or for years now, at least. And there doesn't seem to be any change ahead of us.
So I would say that first of all, the licensing issue. So record labels have got way better at licensing in terms of what they're willing to license to. It's just the issue about advances is something that's holding things back. We're beginning to see the first signs that there's flexibility there, so it would be great to see more flexibility. I would also like, if a record label is going to insist on taking equity in a company, that it behaves like an investor. when a venture capital company puts equity and takes equity in a company, they go on the board. They help make management decisions. Well, there should be a responsibility that goes with taking an equity stake in a company. So I think those sort of head towards some of the issues. I think the big problem in Europe is if you're a music service, it's the amount of resource and effort that it takes to get all the licenses in place with all of the different bodies across all the countries.
Every country, yeah.
But one thing I would say is a really positive note about 2012 and which impacts licensing is the emergence of APIs from companies like Deezer and from Spotify, which allow people to build music services on top of their music licenses.
Because they have organized it well, they pay out whatever needs to be paid out, and you can do.
And that allows a digital innovator to focus on what they do best, building great music experiences, rather than having to spend all of the time working out how to sign commercial deals with different rights holders, learning about the rights landscape. Well, actually, they can shortcut that bit entirely and go straight onto building good products.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Are there any other good points?
Yes, there are many, many other good points. I mean, as I say, there's a huge amount working around the broader digital music experience. There are much better fan communities, there's much better communities around live, there's great fun apps for discovering music, there's lots of games, so there's a huge amount in enriching the digital music experience. The devices are getting better. But there is a risk that those devices are getting better at doing more interactive things than just music. You look at when Apple launch a new device, do they have a record label on stage to help them demonstrate the device? No, they get a games publisher to show how a game can use the accelerometer and the multi-touch and the graphics card and all those sort of things. So I think, yes, there's lots to be positive about, but I do firmly believe that music products need to really catch up with where other media industries are at the moment.
Yeah. But who's, well, I don't want to talk about blame, but who's, if we do talk about blame, who's to blame? Is it like the technical companies who look at the games market first, or is it like the music? Well, are music companies to blame themselves as well? Like record companies, didn't they stay put too long because they didn't want anything to change? They thought it was all bad and nothing good was going to come out of it.
So nobody's blameless for a start, especially not consumers. So everybody has to shoulder some blame.
Yeah.
The idea that record labels aren't driving change anymore, I think that period is gone. There's no doubt that the late 90s and the early noughties, it was clearly the case that record labels were not responding quickly enough, that they were facing purely in a defensive containment mode rather than really focusing on how they could actually try to license and innovate. That is different now. You're seeing vast changes in the way that services are innovating, but it's still not enough. And one of the reasons why it's not enough is because across the world's top 10 music markets, the CD accounts for about 70% of sales. So if all of the businesses are built around a dying product. And they can't just kill the product off, because if they do so, 70% of their business disappears. So it's incredibly difficult as an organisation to say, we will focus our efforts in licensing the next generation of music products, when you've got to have your entire business still built around servicing a dying product, because that's where all of your revenues are, and it's where your customers are.
So how what's the solution?
So I think the solution is, there are a number of solutions. One should be, I think, new approaches to innovation. So you see Open EMI with the major record label EMI essentially setting up a body that sits somewhere between the record label and the technology community. I think more things like that, where you start having dialogue around innovation that isn't tied to commercial ends straight away. Because whenever a technology company talks to a record label, a book publisher, any of the rights holders, it's not just a music industry problem. The vast majority of the time when they talk, it's about a commercial deal. It's how can we get this license, or what are the terms for us getting this?
But that's what they are about. They want to make money.
They are, but everybody wants to make money. Record labels are in the business of making money as well. So everybody's in the business of making money. The difference is, if you're having conversations which are purely based upon, I want to get these commercial terms. So the room is full of lawyers. You've got everybody's got agendas that they're trying to achieve. If instead you had dialogue which was, sure, we'll have those conversations, they still need to happen, but we're going to have different ones where we're going to sit down without a commercial end in sight. We're just going to say, what's important to you in the next year or two? What's important to us in the next year or two? Now let's work out a way to try to get there.
if you could change one thing in the music industry of today, what would it be?
If I could change one thing, it would be removing consumer apathy. I think the majority of consumers are simply not interested enough in music anymore. Music had more of a hold on people 10, 15 years ago.
But they do go to a lot of concerts, for instance.
The aficionados do, and so you've got the market split between the aficionados, the people who love music, are always at the top. The percentage of people who go to concerts is a small subset of music buyers. It is not the majority of music buyers, and so what you've got is lots of passive music buyers are falling out of the market. In the US and the UK alone, since 2008, 10.5 million people stopped buying music entirely. Just fell out of the habit of buying music. And that is something that's happening.
But maybe they got a Spotify account.
No, this is stop buying music. Not going digital even. So there were additional ones who stopped buying CDs and then went to Spotify or somewhere like that. Now this is people who just stopped buying music entirely.
So they don't listen, or maybe on the radio.
Well, that's one of the things. People now get so much more free music than they ever did before. And I'm not just talking about going to torrents. You think about the amount of legal music that's available. Satellite radio in the US, digital audio broadcast in the European markets, internet radio give us many more radio stations that better suit our taste because of niche channels. Every TV that you turn on has multiple music TV channels available. You turn on a console game, it's got lots of music on the soundtrack. We've got YouTube, so everywhere you turn, there's more and more music. For a passive music fan, somebody who might only have bought a CD or two a year, then there's less and less reason for them to need to buy music anymore. And then for the really engaged aficionados, well, great, they are engaged, but they're going to get to a stage where they're engaged, they're also incredibly technology savvy. They are going to feel that their expectations are not being met by digital music experiences because they're not exciting enough.
They want more.
Exactly.
But it sounds like a really difficult problem because how can you change people's behaviour?
So I think what needs to happen is twofold. So one is a very large number of those apathetic, passive music buyers, they're gone. Yeah. Let's not even try keeping hold of them.
No.
The bottom 60% of music buyers in the UK account for 18% of spending. So you've got the vast majority accounting for hardly any music spending. Yeah. And yet the top 10% account for nearly half of spending. So music spending has become too concentrated in those people, exactly like I say, the ones who go to gigs, who buy the T-shirts. You've got a small number of people becoming vastly important. And that, in the same way as a concentration for the big companies like Google and Amazon, that is also dangerous, having too small a number of people being responsible for so many of the spending.
But again, how can you change this?
You can change it, I think, by what we need is a third way. Because what we have at the moment is the first way is paid music services and paid downloads. And they're great, they account for the engaged music customers, but paid download buyers, it's only about 10-15% of people actually pay for downloads. So the vast majority of people aren't there yet. The percentage of people who pay for a subscription, small single-digit percent. So the majority of people are not in that top bit. The majority of people are in the bottom bit, which is free music on YouTube, free Spotify, or just listening to the radio. So what really the third way is how do you get the best of both of those? How do you make the scale, the vastness of the passive music buying population start spending money? And I think the way you do that is you get people to spend money on music without even realising they're spending money. So you bundle music into a car. You bundle music into a piece of hi-fi equipment that sits in the living room. You bundle music into a smartphone. You bundle it into your mobile phone package, into your ISP package.
And you pay for it when you buy a thing like that?
Exactly. So you're not being told you're buying music. You're being told you've got music free with what you're buying. You think about the cost of, say, somebody buys a new car for 12 or 15,000 euros. The cost of 3 years of a Spotify subscription as a percentage of that is tiny. So you can hide it entirely in the cost. And you think about the amount of money people spend on extras in a car, whether it's a different type of wheel or a different type of dashboard or whatever. So I think car is a really exciting way.
So Spotify should go and talk to car.
Well, they already are.
Oh, they are. Yeah,
yes.
really.
No, and there's a lot happening in automotive, but more needs to happen. In 3 years' time or so, some major car manufacturers are already saying they're going to stop putting CD players in cars. CD players are disappearing out of the living room. They're disappearing out of laptops. Ultrabooks don't have drives. Look at the most dynamic part of the PC market are tablets. No CD player in tablets.
No. no. So it is moving in that direction, but now you want to have the supplement in money wise supplement when you buy like a laptop or not maybe not a laptop but what's it called? The tablet,
yes.
that there is money hidden in there.
Exactly. And I think it has to be done, by the way, on commercial terms. It can't be a tax. It can't be a, sort of a tax imposed on how much, so any device manufacturer has to pay a certain amount. It's got to be a commercial deal that's done in a way where the device manufacturer, the car manufacturer, the telco thinks, I am going to sell more of my product because it's got this music service bundled in. That's the only way it can work. And it can work. We've got case studies, across the globe of where it has worked. So I'd say, in summary, the two ways of sort of moving the market forward is, one is for those more passive, more apathetic music fans, is giving them services that feel like free or feel like close to free. And then for the engaged fans, it's really up the ante in terms of what a high-quality music experience should be. It should be brought up to date, dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century with pictures and video and interactivity and all of the things which happens elsewhere in people's digital experiences.
If you would start a business today in music industry, what would it be?
At the moment, I think there's a lot to be done in streaming. In terms of, I think there's a lot of areas around niche services. I think there's a lot to be done around trying to get towards these mass market consumers through innovative pricing and partnerships. But I think the really exciting bits are also around discovery. Discovery is a problem which nobody's been able to fix. Lots of people have had to go in the last couple of years. Some people are even saying discovery is a problem that consumers don't want fixing. I believe they do. Because
with discovery, you mean there's so much around. Where do you find?
When there are 22 million songs in a music service, there's so much choice. There's no choice at all. No. So there needs to be a hand to help people through, and that will become more and more important because the next wave of digital music adoption is going to inherently come not from the early adopters, but from those more mass market consumers. The more mass market consumers are not the ones who go to loads of gigs and know where to look. No. They need their hands holding.
Yeah. So
something around discovery, recommendation, but it's got to be done in a way which doesn't feel intrusive. People don't really like the idea of, oh, look, you're listening to this, therefore listen to these next three songs.
Especially when they got it wrong once.
Exactly, and then they lose their trust.
Yeah.
So I think trust is incredibly important, but I also think it's got to be done in a way which is a truly integrated part of a music experience. It's a seamless part of, oh, well, of course I'm going to go and listen to that next.
So you're summarizing, you're critical. You're not. You say it's not going fast enough. You're not really optimistic, but on the other hand, you see a lot of chances.
Oh, I think there's most of the ingredients are there. It's just that the recipe has to be found.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank.